silent.
We didn't choose to become social activists. It came out of a need.
This person could be, you know, my grandpa, my uncle, my dad. Yeah, it's scary.
Here we go again. Weapons confusion.
Yeah, here we go again. New name, similar scenario. This time, Dante Wright, just 20 years old. He should still be alive today. Wright was killed by a police officer in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, just miles away from where George Floyd's life ended. The trial for the former officer who killed him still ongoing. Now, for the black community, it's reopening wounds that seem to never really heal. Will the killing ever end? Well, it's been nearly 400 years. Good evening. I'm Marcus Washington.
And I'm Jessica Aguirre. The weight of that burden seen clearly on the streets of Minneapolis and beyond as calls for justice for Dante echo in the streets. Here in the Bay Area, anger and fear are still palpable in the Asian American community. Attacks in that community are still happening. Now, the officer who fatally shot Dante Wright faces second-degree manslaughter charges. We should warn you, some of the video that you're about to see may be disturbing. It's another haunting scene captured on video. Another young black man dead. The actions of another police officer questioned. In Minneapolis, 20-year-old Dante Wright killed by police during a traffic stop. Brooklyn Center police officer Kim Potter claiming she intended to fire her taser, but accidentally pulled her gun.
That a police officer will shoot and kill another unarmed black man.
The shooting took place less than 10 miles from the courthouse where former police officer Derek Chauvin is standing trial for the death of George Floyd. Floyd's brother took the stand.
That's my oldest brother, George.
The Dante Wright shooting carried echoes of the death of Oscar Grant, who was killed at the Fruitvale BART station in Oakland in 2009. BART police officer Johannes Meserly also said that he reached for his taser, but accidentally drew his gun.
Because it always pertains to people of color when it comes to this issue concerning weapons confusion.
I'm honestly afraid to get out.
Yeah, you should be.
In Virginia, a police officer fired this week after video showed him dousing a black Army medic with pepper spray. This is after pulling over that driver for not having plates on his SUV. Back here in the Bay Area, demonstrators rallied against the continuing attacks on Asians.
This is a watershed moment in Asian American history.
These short clips of videos, shot on phones and body cameras, log a heartbreaking record of inequality. Difficult to look at, impossible to forget.
Those images difficult to ignore. Now, a local faith leader says that police brutality is a systemic and historical reality for black and brown communities. Pastor Mike McBride is director of Live Free Campaign and the founder of Berkeley's Way Church. He took part in the protest in Ferguson. I asked him how he felt watching events unfold in Minnesota.
Well, I continue to be reminded that the historical legacy of police brutality is enduring in this country. There's not been one day in the history of this country where black and brown bodies have not been subjected to arbitrary violence at the hands of the state. And many of us, including myself, have been victimized by such violence.
Is it stunning to you that what's unfolding is happening right as we're watching the Derek Chauvin trial?
Well, not really, because this literally happens every day. It happens every day in our country, in many cities across the country. The Chauvin trial is the highest, most visible and public expression of a daily reality in too many black and brown folks' lives. What kind of culture is so unaccountable and unaware of the moment that they cannot police themselves? The answer to that would require us, the correct answer to that would require us to have a much more rigorous and verbose approach to literally reimagining the public safety apparatus in this country. And for many, I think that is too hard of a hill for them to climb.
How would you reimagine policing in this country?
the police serve the interests of the people, the masses of the people, and even those who are most vulnerable among us. The data tells us that less than 5% of all arrests that police make are for violent offenses. And so if that is the case, why are police being used to respond to traffic incidences, to nonviolent offenses, to issues that could easily be resolved more likely with public health individuals, with unarmed public safety officers, with community-based solutions?
Is it your reality, what I'm hearing you say, that even in your position as a leader of the church, as a man of faith, as a leader in your community, that you go outside and you fear that something could happen to you if you were to be at crosshairs with a police officer?
Absolutely. I mean, now you have to remember, many of us who are faith leaders, who are folks who have quote unquote respectable positions, if we show up in a protest, we will be treated with the same disrepute and often violent tactics as our fellow quote unquote protesters. We can't allow me wearing a collar, someone wearing a suit, someone having tattoos on their body, someone with saggy pants be the litmus test for understanding why police continue to abuse their authority without accountability.
All right, Pastor Mike, we appreciate you talking to us. Thank you for your insight. And we loved having you with us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, that last statement, as they say, let the church say amen. All right, well, you know what? These are tough times. In the Asian American community, racist attacks are happening every day, whether it's physical or verbal. Malik Pancholi is an actor, author, activist. He served on President Obama's Advisory Commission for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. In 2015, he co-founded Act to Change. This is a national nonprofit combating bullying.
You know, I want to note that we started this campaign in 2015, Act to Change. And we knew that there was an issue then, you know, that Asian American kids in this country were being bullied at sometimes really alarming rates, and that we needed to address that. And then in 2017, there was a rise in anti-Muslim and anti-immigrant rhetoric and violence and hatred towards those communities that we had to meet. At the start of 2020, there was the pandemic bringing racism towards anyone who looked like they might be from China. There's just such a history of racism and violence in this country, and I feel like we're at a moment where we're all talking about it.
Have you ever experienced a situation where you were attacked, you were taunted because of your race?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I feel like for me, there was a series kind of microaggressions that I was aware of, you know, sort of being made to feel different, whether it was, you know, someone kind of offhandedly making fun of my parents' accent behind my back or the food. I remember being in the car with my mom and someone rear-ended us. And I was in middle school, and we got out of the car. My mom got out of the car, and I was still sitting in the car, and I could hear the guy say to my mom, "You're not even from this country." And you know, this is a phrase that we hear a lot now still. So much of the work I do as an activist ties into who I am as an artist, as an actor, as an author.
I want to talk about a personal moment for you. I saw it online as you talked about your cultural identity when you started college at Northwestern. Talk to me about what that experience was for you.
I worked very hard, you know, subconsciously, I think, not even realizing it, trying to whitewash myself, trying to be, you know, what I thought was quote unquote more, you know, American, trying to be more straight, you know, as it were. And it took me a long time to realize that no, in fact, I can embrace exactly who I am. And this was the main reason I decided to write a book. You know, my book, The Best at It, is about a 12-year-old gay Indian American kid who's coming into his own and struggling with figuring out his identity and finding his place in the world. And I wanted to write that book because it was a book that I didn't have when I was 12 years old. And sadly still doesn't really exist. And so I was like, if no one is going to tell my story, then maybe it's incumbent upon me to tell that story.
You're in an industry that oftentimes I've heard many actors talk about, you know, there aren't parts written for me. Do you go into auditions and say, you know, this is not meant for me, but I want this character? What has that experience been like for you working in an industry.
Like I remember early on as an actor, the parts that were, really readily available were the foreign exchange student, or, hey, can you bring your own turban to the audition? I remember like one of my first TV jobs playing the foreign exchange student and being really horrified because it was like every joke was based on my character's culture and ethnicity, and that was not written by anyone who looked like me. And that was the problem. I'm at a place in my own career now where I can say no to things like that. I can push back on things like that, and I have, and I've done that successfully, where I've actually had people change things in scripts. This idea that we need executives, we need writers, we need producers, not just the actors, but the people who are creating the stories that have the authentic experience and will write about it.
And in this space that we're in right now, do you feel heard?
Post 9/11, where so many of my friends who look like me were scared to go out into the world. Now it's so many of my friends who look East Asian, who are afraid to let their parents go out in the world. Speaking to you, it's like after the George Floyd murders this summer, just watching the Black community grieve and Americans try to process, hundreds of years of brutality. Yeah, it's a painful time, and I really do hang my hat, though, on the optimism of the fact that there's an opportunity here.
And for one of those opportunities, you can go to acttochange.org. This is to take a pledge to end bullying. Act to Change will be holding its third annual National AAPI Day Against Bullying and Hate virtually. This is on May 18th.
While representation matters, stories matter. Up next, actors Daniel Day Kim and Christine Chang get personal, why they say it's so important to speak up against anti-Asian hate, even when it's uncomfortable.
When COVID was at its worst, a man stopped me in the street. He grabbed my arm and spat in my face, then shoved me aside like I was nothing.
That powerful scene from New Amsterdam, the medical show that airs right here on NBC Bay Area. It was inspired, though, by an actual exchange experienced by actor Christine Chang. Actor Daniel Day Kim is also a star on that show. Earlier this month, our Janelle Wang hosted a panel discussion with the actors and the show's executive producers on the importance of talking about anti-Asian crimes on the screen and in real life.
I felt really seen. So I think it's just really powerful because, like a lot of other Asians, I have felt invisible for much of my life.
When we take a story from one of our actors' lives, like this one, especially when it's so traumatic, we are then asking our actor to relive that trauma, take after take, camera angle after camera angle for hours on our set, and it takes a lot of courage.
It's a real testament to how all of us need to work together. You have a woman of Asian descent, of East Asian descent, who has this experience, and then you have a woman of South Asian descent who hears this story and brings it to David, who is a white male, and says, this story needs to be told. This is an example of the allyship that I think we all need to be fighting for. It's not going to happen with just one group fighting all of the others. And we can't be pitted against one another in this kind of an effort. It speaks to the importance of diversity in a writer's room.
What are you hearing from your communities and from other Asian American leaders and the AAPI community? How often are you hearing stories about racism and hate?
I mean, in the past month, I've experienced 2 more incidents myself, being shouted at in Union Square, coming from an anti-Asian racism rally. Someone called me a dirty effing pig. I've been hearing stories from every single one of my Asian American friends. I'm actually afraid to take the subway now, which is a pretty sad admission.
One thing we never hear about that I think is incredibly crucial to amplify is that our kids are going back to school now. And everyone knows how cruel school children can be. And I remember very distinctly and painfully how much I was bullied for being Asian.
Why do you think it's so important to just get victims to talk and to talk about this, even though it's kind of maybe uncomfortable? Why is it so important?
You know, for those people who experience things like Christine went through, you know, it's very easy for them to feel like, well, even if I tell the police, they're not going to do anything about it. And the other complicating factor is that a lot of these crimes are happening in underprivileged communities where the relationship to policing is under question right now. And so that's another reason why these crimes are being underreported, in addition to the cultural elements of it and the language barriers that a lot of people who are victims face. We need accurate reporting of these statistics because this is what they base legislation off of. It's also how they police their communities, and just as importantly, it's how they allocate funds to community organizations. There's a statistic right now that I think is really it blew my mind when I read it, and that is that when monies are distributed to groups in the community, the percentage that's contributed to Asian American Pacific Islander groups is 0.2% of the entire funding pie. 0.2%. So that means for every $1 million that are given out to these community organizations, $2,000 goes to Asian Americans. You look at organizations like Stop AAPI Hate, Hate is a Virus, and many other community organizations, they are operating on very slim budgets, and most of them are volunteering their time. And this is a significant issue in our community. And so it's one of the many reasons we should be reporting.
The more that the public sees this, the more it's going to be on their consciousness. If you don't see something, you don't think that it matters.
And Janelle joins us now to tell us a little bit more. So what was that experience for you, like having this discussion in this panel with those actors?
I knew it was going to be a powerful discussion, Jessica, but it was also very emotional. And there were many times it was difficult to hear the stories of the hate speech toward Christine Chang. She's suffered it multiple times in the past year. But it was remarkable about how much they're doing and how much community leaders and just community members are stepping up and actually being a voice to the people who are voiceless. So that was very encouraging to hear all the things that are being done and all the organizations that have started to help stop hate.
What was the takeaway for you from all of this?
To speak up and to, I think there's, you know, I'm a journalist, right? And I did go to a rally one time and I was worried. Am I an activist? I don't want to be I'm a journalist, right? But I thought, I'm not an activist, I'm an advocate. I'm speaking up against hate. This is not a political issue, this is a people issue. This is a humanity issue. This is about just defending others who can't defend themselves. As we know, Jessica, we cover it all the time. A lot of the elderly are being attacked, and these are the helpless. I mean, these are innocent people being targeted for no reason. And I feel like, you know, they may be afraid to speak up, but I'm not afraid to speak up for them and just basically help this movement move forward.
Well, Janelle, you have grown up here in the Bay Area. Are you surprised by the sentiment that you're seeing now at all? I know you have, you know, older parents in this area. This is your home. Are your parents afraid to go out?
Yeah, my mom had an incident a few months ago, and it just angered me. Somebody shouted something at her while she was just eating outside, and they took off on a bicycle. So I know after that, I was worried for her. I said, Mom, just don't go out by yourself anymore. And I think she was afraid to go out. I think a lot of people are afraid to go out. Our elderly Asian parents go out by themselves. It's recommended they don't, because these attacks are happening all over the Bay Area. And it is a surprise for me, Jessica. I grew up here in the Bay Area. I never really experienced any racism because we're so culturally diverse here. I mean, the most diverse area in the entire country. So it did shock me, but I know it happens. And, you know, it's a very difficult time, this pandemic. It's very hard on so many people, and I think people are acting out, but it's now time to stand together and be unified and basically stop these hate crimes against all communities.
Yeah, time for all of us to unite. All right, thank you, Janelle.
Well, up next, racism in country music. The moment that marked MIKO Marks, how she overcame it, and now her resilience. My conversation with her, up next. Country music singer MIKO Marks is now making the music she wants to make. She's out with her first album in more than a year. I met with MIKO near her home in Oakland. Now, country music, no surprise here for a lot of people, is an industry where there aren't many black women. Marks face a lot of disappointment and racism. She actually shared with me the moment that affected her the most.
I remember when I performed in Homer, Louisiana, and it's a really small town. And I was opening up for my label mate, Chris Gray, at the time. Well, I had to go to the restroom, and there was this sea of white people that I had to get through to go to that restroom. I was the only black person there. That was the longest walk that I have ever had to take. And I felt like as I got closer to the bathroom, I was getting closer to getting in trouble. You know, like something was gonna happen to me on my way. I was really scared. And the only love that I felt at that show was when I performed and when I got off stage. Only then, only while I performed, it was back to coldness after I performed. And that's when I knew it was going to be a long road, because it wasn't about the music. There was much more to it.
They loved your talent, but not you.
Yes. And that was a hard pill to swallow.
How long ago was that, and do you think it's changed?
That was in about 2005, and I don't know if it's changed because I haven't performed in a small town like that in a while, but that experience marked me. It was a marker.
You go to country music's hub, Nashville, and you have this voice. Your voice is beautiful.
Thank you.
You have the talent. What are you told?
My experience in Nashville was not that great. I met with a major label down there. I'm not going to name it, but it's huge. It was the label to be on. And I was told that my music was great. Oh, it sounds so wonderful. You have such an angelic voice, but I don't think you would sell, you know. And when that was told to me, I was like, well, if the music is great, why wouldn't I sell? So clearly I took it as, you know, being a woman of color and being a woman were the things that would keep me from selling. And it's going to take a lot of communication, a lot of label heads and on down to really start to include people, women of color, people of color, indigenous people. All these people make country music. You know, there's Mickey Guyton, Reese Palmer, Willie Jones, if you don't know. There's so many, and I've met and talked with a lot of them, and we're coming, we're here.
The country music, or the song of country music, I have to say, is one of heartache and pain.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you have that song in your journey in this music industry?
Absolutely. It might not look like a story of like a love song, heartache and pain. No, it looks like injustice, heartache and pain. It looks like America's history not being really looked at and viewed and from its foundation. That's where my pain comes from. It looks like young boys being killed in the streets. That's my pain, and it comes through with the music. It looks like my hometown city still suffering from dirty water, Flint, Michigan.
Why is it so important for you to break that barrier, to break the mold in an industry that is so resistant to your presence?
It's important to me. I've been around this business for about 15 years, and I took a little hiatus from recording, and now I'm back with a new project, Our Country. It looks like my resilience. It looks like my power. I'm taking my power back.
America, your time has come.
I recorded Goodnight America before the pandemic, like a month before the pandemic, and I heard that song and it just broke a yoke in me. And with this project, everything happened so organically. There was no work involved. It was effortless. The songs were written how they came out.
What do you hope people hear when they listen to your music?
I hope they hear my soul, my sincerity, my authenticity, and my love for music and my love for country music, Americana, roots music.
What noble vision that all men should be free.
Her voice is so beautiful.
Yeah, no doubt that she has an amazing talent right there, and it's really hard to believe that there are people up in the music industry, within the country music industry, that told her no, just solely because of the way she looks. And not just physical, but you know, her physical appearance, her skin color. That is very shocking, and it goes back to something I heard many years ago when someone says, you know, they love our rhythm but not our blues. I know this is country music, but you know, you love the talent that I give, but not the person that gives the talent.
Right.
And you know, I think country music is one of those industries we've heard a lot about. People are not very open to change, but the artists like her and many others out there right now that are really forcing that change, and they're talented enough to do it.
Well, it's interesting because she's got the added barrier that she's a woman, because you see, you know, country music singers like Jimmy Allen or Darius Rucker, who have both been very open about how resistant country music was to having two black men, you know, but they've made it to the top of the charts. And you add another layer of that on top of that, you're a woman, so that makes it more complex as we go, because country music has a very specific look attached to what a country female singer looks like.
Yeah, but we know that's changing.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
All right. Well, we have a lot of change going on, and we're going to keep talking about that change too, right here.
Yeah, things are heavy right now in the world. So thank you for being with us.